Welcome to the From Concealment Podcast, the show for firearm enthusiasts who like to shoot, train, carry, and compete. Get ready for some shooting and sight, firearm and accessory reviews, and of course, insight on conceal carry. And now, broadcasting from behind enemy lines in the From Concealment studio, it's Pete Mitchell and Dan Sams.
Hey, Freedom Nation, this is Pete Mitchell.
And I'm Dan Sams.
And you are listening to the From Concealment Podcast. And this week's podcast is being brought to you by Fast OC. You can check them out over at fastoc.com. They got all kinds of great training programs, handgun challenges, you name it, they got it. In fact, Dan, I just did a handgun challenge with them recently. It was last Thursday. And as I like to say, when I'm at the Fast OC handgun challenges, if I make it in the top 50%, I'm feeling pretty good because those guys are good. Like they're really good. So I ended up getting 9 out of 23, 24, something like that. So a little bit better than 50%. I felt pretty strong in that. I know I could have been a lot better. There were a couple of stages that my mind wasn't in it, and I think that cost me at least 2, if not 3 positions in the overall. So, it is what it is. But interestingly enough, I got to tell you, man, this one guy, his name is Dan, really good shooter. I mean, love talking to the guy. He's a funny guy, and we're doing this one stage. Wasn't a lot of movement needed, but there was a part where you had to break out in kind of a full run, and it's at an indoor range. This particular one was at FT3 in Stanton, for those here in Orange County, California that know where that's at. And he breaks out in the full run and eats it. I mean, just like... He's down and everyone's watching, right? Because he's got the gun in his hand. He's sliding on the ground, finger off the trigger like a champ. Just
nice.
It was perfect. Recovers, get back up, finishes off the shoot, and everyone was just clapping afterwards because he handled it like a champ, didn't break the 180 rule. Like literally everything was perfect. Interestingly enough, he still had 5 seconds off my time. And
what?
I know, but I mean, I actually did better because my accuracy was much better than he was on that particular stage.
Nice.
But
nice.
Yeah, I mean, he was flying. So guys, check out Fast OC if you're looking to do some handgun challenges. They even have an intro to competition. So if you're like, hey, I want to get into this, I don't know how it works. That's how I started. I literally went to Fast OC's intro to competitions so I could learn about it. They'll take you down to the range. You're going to do some shooting there as well. And it's just a lot of fun. Everyone there is really cool. Everyone there has fun. Doesn't matter, guys, gals, everyone's welcome. It's a good time had by all, as I like to say.
Yeah. That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. That sounds
What's new with you,
actually,
man?
Oh, man. Just thinking about guns, man. I've been. It's just been a crazy time with all the Beto O'Rourke stuff.
Yeah.
And people are like, all right, come and take it, see what happens, sucker. I don't know if you've heard about the guy who said, I guess he's been in some discussion, and Beto O'Rourke was like, well, by your logic, then people could just own bazookas too, right? And we're all like, well, this is, now we're talking.
Now we're getting somewhere in the conversation.
Now you understand. Shall not be infringed. So I've been having a good time in various gun discussions, and meme pages have just been on fire lately. And this Beto guy is giving us a lot of great fodder for memes.
I know you've denied it. You've denied it on the show. I still believe you're running one of the Liberty memes pages. I don't know which one, but deep down, I believe you're running one because I know your obsession is to like every one of those pages.
Yeah, so I do have a personal goal that anytime, which is ironic to me that Facebook suggests these pages to me, right, when they're constantly shutting them down.
Right.
But as soon as one of them comes through, like I have a personal conviction that I have to click like on all of them. And it's just so beautiful. I'm probably following at this point several hundred Liberty meme pages. I wish that I had the skill to contribute one. I do think I might.
I understand you have to say that publicly. I just don't believe it.
It's just, I might have some connections. I'm just not. I'm a consumer, man. I just take in the memes, dude. I just love them.
What I loved was what's his name? Beto? Is that how he pronounces his name?
I don't know. That's how I've been pronouncing it. I really don't know the right way to pronounce it.
I loved his quote, something about you're not allowed to have grenade launchers and blah, blah, blah. And then like this place in Texas is like, actually you are. And please check out our line of 40 millimeter grenade launchers that you can pick up here at Texas. And it was like the link to their website. And I was like,
oh, it's beautiful.
This is awesome. And this guy does not realize that's his own state. That's his own state that it's legal to have that.
Well, here's the thing. It's not legal for him to have it because he's a felon.
Well, see, I didn't hear that he was a felon. I heard that it was dismissed.
Oh, maybe so. My understanding...
he broke into someone's house, yes.
But
it was
he's got
dismissed.
a DUI, too. Maybe that's so maybe he's not an official felon. He's just... He's done the felony, just that he hasn't got the title. Yeah. No, it's crazy. This is a wild time.
He's done the felony. He just hasn't gotten the title. That's the best way to put it.
That's right. Oh, my goodness. Oh, and then what I'm really loving is the gun stores that are putting up his picture as Employee of the Month.
I know, right?
Those are great. Oh, it's awesome. It's just bonkers right now. And we've already talked about this. You can't have a rational discussion. People don't want to do that. So we're having as much fun as we can. Laughing as the world burns. It's just nuts. But no, this whole stuff with bazookas and rocket launchers is awesome.
See, here's my own personal philosophy. Ruth is going to die.
Yeah.
Trump is going to put someone else in who's another conservative. A measure is finally going to be brought before the Supreme Court that I don't know if it's going to be Second Amendment. I don't know if it's going to be on abortion. It's going to be one of the third rails of politics in the United States. Mm-hmm. And now with there being no chance for the liberal side to happen, it's going to lead to another civil war or just an outright, like, we don't care at all what the government says, and it's over. It's all over.
Yeah.
Like, that's my own personal theory of what's coming down the pipe. Because there's no, like you said, there's no rational discussion that anybody's willing to have. And so, and not like you and I are any better. We're sitting here doing this podcast because we kind of think they're all crazy, right?
Yeah, you know what, though? Like, this is where we entertain ourselves and others, and we do provide some information. I mean it. I engage in actual, thoughtful, kind conversation when somebody's willing to.
Right.
I actually have a great story on that as a side note. I really am willing to do that. Seldom is somebody willing to sit down and do that. And it's usually people that have known, honestly, it's usually people who have known me as a pastor that know that I care, I love them, I have a high regard for human life. And I'll have somebody say, like, Dan, you're a man of God, you love people, how is it you love guns too? And I'll be like, I'm glad you asked. Let's sit down and we talk through it. And that's normally how I can at least get somebody to have understanding, right. Or at least have a conversation, even if they don't agree. Yeah. Actually, can I share a quick side note story on that?
That's the whole point of this podcast.
Yeah,
it's all side notes.
I had a guy that I knew from my old church, and a nice dude, who'd never grown up around guns. And a side note, this is who if I'm just being real honest, many of the people that are the most anti-gun that I know are rich white people. And they're people who grew up rich white people. And so the idea that I would ever use a gun to hunt or to target shoot or to defend anything, like, they've never had to do that. They've lived in nice communities. They've had everything they needed. The idea of,
they've lived in a tower so ivory they can't possibly fathom.
Yeah. And the irony is they're like, well, we can't let anybody have guns. And I'm like, you realize that, like, many people from even other ethnicities, we live in communities where, like, guns for self-defense are pretty essential. Not to mention, people living out in the woods that, defend against bears and against coyotes and feed your family with them. Anyway, though, I'm sitting down with this guy, and he's talking through. He's like, "It just really, I don't understand where this comes from." And I'm like, "Well, I'm happy to answer whatever." And I'm like, "Just shoot it at me. What do you need to know?" He's like, "Well, first of all," he's like, "you don't need guns for hunting because you can just go to the store and buy food." And I'm like, "Okay, that's easy for you to say. Like, you're a work from home consultant who makes really good money." But I told him, I'm like, my family sometimes lived off of meat that my uncle killed, or somebody in our church would tithe meat from the deers they killed. And I'm like, we kind of needed it, man. So next question, right? And then he says, "Well, why do you need a semi-automatic to hunt?" And this is a common one. He's like, "Why do you need a semi-automatic?" And he's like, "Because it just ruined the meat." And I'm like, "Wait, what?" I'm confused. I'm like, what do you think semi-automatic means? He's like, "That's when you like hold down the trigger and just all the bullets come out." And I'm like, "No, man, I just got to tell you, like, categorically, that's not what semi-automatic. That's actually fully automatic." And I said, "While that's technically legal to get, it's really, really hard." And I went through try to explain that, which gets really complicated. But what was interesting is all these things this guy thought about guns were completely false.
Yeah.
And at the very least, we ended our conversation with him being educated. But it comes down to just really fundamental things like semi-auto versus full auto. And I would bet most, just from what I know anecdotally, most anti-gun people think that semi-auto means full auto. And it's a really hard conversation.
A big part of that,
to have.
though, Dan, is because of the movies. You watch a movie, they do not use semi-automatic weapons. They're all full auto.
Always
like, all
auto.
of a sudden, they got Glock 18s like everywhere.
Yeah.
No one else has a Glock 18, but in the movies, they all do.
Oh, and then they have like unlimited, ammunition. Like they're never reloading. And
well, that's because they're using clips, not magazines. See, we all need to learn that trick.
Oh, that one drives me nuts too. No, it's funny. I actually had an interesting discussion with somebody about that. They were trying to say that the National Firearms Act was helpful because it makes it harder for somebody to get a fully automatic weapon. And they're like, "See, all these mass shootings, people don't use full autos." And I'm like, "Well, first of all, that's not why." I'm like, that's, have you ever shot a full auto? And they're like, "Well, no." And I'm like, you dump the ammo pretty quick and you don't hit much. If you want to clear a room, sure. But like, we would actually probably, and I'm saying this cautiously, that I would actually say we might have a lower body count on mass shootings if they were using full autos, because, man,
you'd be out of bullets.
You dump a mag so quick. People don't realize. Now, I realize different guns are different, but man, I remember shooting a MAC-10 not long ago because somebody had one for an NFA transfer in at the store. We got to shoot it. All legal, by the way. We did everything legal. We were able to shoot it. Man, I mean, it's like, and it's empty. Like, I'm like, man, the only thing you could do would, as fast as possible, move your arm to spray a room indiscriminately, hitting anything that's there. You just dump in ammo so quick.
Yep.
So anyway, this is why, as somebody was explaining, this is a little tricky, but because of the National Firearms Act, you've got to get that $200 tax stamp. There's the whole thing. Theoretically, though, you can own whatever you want. So I heard somebody.
What's interesting, by the way, the reason why they did the $200, which back then when they did it, is the equivalent of like $3,000 a day.
Yeah.
Because they knew it was unconstitutional to outlaw everything that was included in the NFA. Like they knew it. So they're like, "Oh, we're just going to make them pay a tax." And honestly, it should have been fought back then, and it wasn't. And so now we have it.
Yeah.
And we need to get rid of it.
Well, and then it's an overreach that makes everything else worse. And then the bigger issue, I mean, that's bad enough, but the whole thing of not being able to manufacture for the public automatic weapons made after, 1984?
86, I believe.
86, there you go. Because that's what, supply and demand, it makes them so expensive.
Yep.
That's why, a MAC-10 that was $500 in 1984 costs $12,000 now.
Yep.
And, yeah. Anyway,
I wish I'd been old enough back then. I would have like literally stocked up on every automatic sear that was serialized, everything I could get, because today, it's worth so much money.
It'd probably be better than investing in gold. You would have done better.
Yeah, probably.
It's worth more than gold as far as your investment goes. So yeah, gun laws, man, driving me crazy. I'm trying to be nice, trying not to get too upset.
By the time everyone hears this episode, because we actually record these a few weeks ahead of time, because we know we're going to hit time when we're not able to record.
Right.
We want to have like a stash of them ready to go. But recently, the ATF has come out and said, "Oh yeah, you know that bump stock ban we did." And I know the court sided with us. Technically, guys, we didn't have the authority to make that law change. Oopsie. So tell me your thoughts on that. They've now admitted that to the court that it was appealed to, and just said, by the way, we didn't have the right to do that.
By the way, they did that after they had already confiscated, something like 800 and some?
I don't know, but I still remember that one manufacturer had $60,000 of them that they had to destroy.
Yeah. It's crazy. I got so many thoughts on this. But, part of what's going down with this is there's a case against the ATF where somebody said, you told me that it was legal to buy these. I bought them. Then you take it away from me. You're taking away a right. You said it was legal. It's not legal. Which is right? And I think that I should be compensated for my trouble. And so, I wish I could find the name. The case is a dude named Aposhian. I'm probably not saying his name correctly, but he's in the process of trying to sue the ATF over this, and this is only going to help his case, man. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. Should we take a minute and describe how a bump stock works?
I think you should, because as you said, you're not banning my belt loop.
Exactly. So now there was an unconstitutional ruling. It's unconstitutional already, but essentially that made you have to get a special tax stamp if you're going to shoot a fully auto weapon, which means you hold down the trigger and it continues to process rounds and shoot more bullets without having to pull it again and again and again. Historically, it has been legal as long as you're pulling the trigger again, that it's considered semi-auto or whatever else, and that it's okay. So the unique thing about a bump stock, which is kind of the slang term for, I think Slide Fire was the main manufacturer that was making these things. It allows you to put essentially the gun into this unique kind of stock that has a kind of holder that comes around that allows you to just hold your finger up against this handle thing, and it causes the gun to just jostle just right so that the trigger bumps up against your finger, and so you're pulling the trigger again and again and again without really having to move your finger. It's the gun that's moving. There's more to it than that, but the simplest way, it allows the gun to just kind of bounce and simulate automatic fire. Still not a fully automatic weapon. The internal function of the gun is not at all fully automatic. It's still semi-automatic. And since the gun is moving, you can't aim at anything. And so it's a novelty item. But it's part of our freedom. So they come along and all of a sudden just kind of magically wave a wand and say that it counts as fully automatic, which we know it doesn't. Now they're going back on it. So was that a good enough explanation? Does that make sense?
I think that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
It's essentially using the recoil of the firearm itself to move in this special stock. So that way, if your finger's in the same position, it's the gun that's moving and therefore causing your finger to trigger a new round with every basically recoil of the gun. Yeah.
And one of the things that people don't understand is there's so many ways to do this. You could even say that the bump stock is... I guess you could say it's a reasonably effective way to do it, but there are so many ways to do this. You can actually hold a gun in your arms just right, and if you kind of hold it just loose enough and it bounces just right, you can achieve the same effect without anything to help
Right.
you out. There's a way to use your belt loop to kind of just hold it just right. I've actually had the experience where I was firing a Kalashnikov, semi-automatic Kalashnikov, and it just bounced just right, and the recoil just against that, I accidentally had a double fire, which would be a negligent fire, and it scared the heck out of me. But just if you're just holding it just right, there's ways to do it. And so no matter how you cut it, this is another reason why banning a thing is not going to change what's actually happening.
And see, to me, what it comes back to is, first of all, I think bump stocks are stupid. I do.
Yeah.
They're horrible for accuracy, but they are fun.
Exactly right.
That's the whole reason why we do half this stuff, is because it's fun.
Yeah.
I mean, you just want, since we can't actually have full auto weapons without, spending $25,000 for a full automatic weapon.
Mm-hmm.
And here in California, we can't get that anyway unless we're in the movie industry, because, we got to have our exemptions from that. So unless you're in the movie industry, you can't have a full auto here in California no matter what. It's just fun. That's literally all it is. It's just fun. And then the one guy uses it in Vegas, and so now all of a sudden we got to ban everything.
Yeah. Allegedly uses it.
Allegedly.
Still haven't seen video. Anyway, don't get
How
me
is that
started on that.
possible? There's like a million cameras in Vegas.
There's cameras everywhere, including his own that he supposedly had set up. But we can't find a motive. We can't find... There's just a whole bunch that still doesn't make sense about that thing. Yeah, it's all weird. Yeah, again, we have our whole thing where we're like, we don't like to develop conspiracy theories. We just point out, like, hey, that's weird. And that's kind of where I'm at on that. But no, they're banning they ban those things pretty quick. Just coming back to the fact that they're fun. And actually, if you're looking for something more effective, and I think it's okay we can mention this because it's not illegal, but man, binary triggers are a much more effective way to go about it.
Let's just throw in there, it depends on what state you live in. Remember, I'm behind the enemy lines out here.
If you live in what is left of the freedom of the United States,
there you go.
Binary trigger is a great way because you have control. Theoretically, actually not just theoretically, if you move your finger fast enough, a binary trigger can be faster than fully auto, so I am told. It's pretty doggone fast if you get your finger rocking just right. But a binary trigger is where it goes bang when you pull it, and it goes bang when you let it go. And so you get your finger rocking back and forth just right, man, you can dump some rounds quick, but then you have the benefit of I can at any time, I'm still in control over it. And that actually has some practical value for defense. So really interesting, lots of fun. They get a little bit expensive. I don't know what they're running right now. I think they're in the like $500 range. But binary triggers are pretty cool. If you want another cheap way to have the same effect that I think is still legal, the last I checked, I don't know if you've seen these GAT cranks. Have you seen one of these?
No, but I can kind of imagine based on the title alone.
Yeah. So it's got like a 3 or 4 paddles on a little thing that you just mount on the trigger guard, and it's got a little crank on the side of it. I mean, it's the simplest little mechanism, and you just you just hold the thing and you just turn it like you're turning a Gatling gun. Those are fun. They're real finicky because if you have it too close to the trigger, then it only goes bang once and then it binds against the trigger. If you have it too far away, it doesn't pull the triggers. You got to have it just right, and so you're kind of tightening it and moving it back, and man, it's fun. We've had some good fun with those, and they're cheap. They're like $50. And last I checked, still legal.
In certain states.
See how long that lasts. In certain states. Yeah, I'm sure it's not legal where you're at.
Dude, I'm sure it's not. I told you, I don't remember if it was on this podcast or not, but we have the Micro-Roni, and the California Department of Justice called the Glock store and was like, those are illegal to sell in California. So Glock immediately, or Glock store, I should say, immediately removed them from their storefront, put on their website, can't be sold to anyone in California. And so I see Lenny McGill at a gun show a few months back, and I'm like, hey, you're selling all the Micro-Ronis here. I thought these were illegal. And he goes, well, The Department of Justice told us they were illegal, so we stopped selling it. But we asked them to see the law, and they were never able to produce a law for us. So we're selling them because there's no law that says it's illegal. And then he goes, now, they're not illegal to sell. They're not illegal to buy. He goes, it's when you put your Glock into it that we're entering a gray area. And he goes, but if you want to go to Arizona or Nevada, you're totally cool. It's just, here in California, you may not be able to actually put your Glock inside of a Microroni. And he didn't want to, and I'm like, I can read between the lines. I understand what you're saying. Yeah. I mean, you're the head of Glock store and you're, basically saying don't stick your gun in it and get caught in California because who knows?
It's bad for everybody.
It's bad for, and because we do have a law that says you can't put a shroud on a pistol, which is part of what they do to keep AR-15 pistols and AK-47 pistols out of California. Oh, you can't have a shroud, and almost anything on the barrel is going to be considered a shroud. And so certainly a mini Roni would be considered a shroud.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I forget that's the ruling they use against that because you don't go immediately to shroud. You go to
exactly. Exactly. I mean, that's not where anyone's mind goes because that's not even what the law was intending. It's just what they're using. And, so the way it goes.
This is where there's so many laws like that are accidental breakage. You hear about these people that fly through a state where gun ownership is virtually illegal, and people will fly through New York. And I mean, there's people that can get jail time not even knowing they were breaking a law. And there's so many.
And we should say, guys, that's because New York, you have to have a license just to own a firearm. And so the problem comes in if you fly through New York, and let's say your transferring flight doesn't happen, they give you all of your bags. If you take that bag with a firearm in it, if you touch it, you've now committed a felony in the state of New York because you do not have the license to have that. So it doesn't matter that you're traveling. And that's how they're getting people. So it's not just the traveling through, it's if you ever have to touch it. So I was actually talking with I was actually taking a CCW class here in California because I needed to add a couple of states, and I needed a certificate. And the husband is a gun attorney, like that's his whole practice is guns. And so they actually had a whole thing that happens if your flight gets diverted to New York, and you're landing in New York. Refuse to take possession of the firearm. And you just tell the airline, I cannot take possession of that. You have to keep a hold of it. Yep. Because the second you take possession of it, now you're committing the felony. Because how are you going to check it back in? You don't have the license. So you show up, to check it back in the next day for the rest of your trip or whatever.
And that's when they get you.
That's when they get you. They're either going to get you leaving or they're going to get you coming back. And so they actually had a whole way for what you do if, it gets kicked off, you accidentally take it, like you forget which bag it's in, whatever. And I'm not going to share that actually here on the podcast because I'd rather an attorney say what to do there.
We're not giving legal advice.
Yeah, exactly.
that disclaimer goes for everything we ever say on
here. But so needless
technically
to say,
this is all just entertainment, Pete. We're characters.
This is all entertainment. You got it. If you were ever in one of those states and you know what those states are, just, I don't know, man. Say a prayer. Might need to be longer than normal because you were behind enemy lines. So
well, here's one of my questions. Does that mean that every baggage specialist, anybody who's handling baggage in a New York airport, has to have a license to be in possession of a gun? Because technically, the staff are all violating that law if they don't have license.
Yeah, it could be, but the problem is that the law technically says the TSA is not allowed to enforce any state law. They are only allowed to enforce any federal law. So they're actually breaking the law by doing anything with the state law, by even concerning themselves with it. They are technically breaking the laws that govern the TSA.
Man,
so they just don't seem to care. No one seems to care, unfortunately.
It's crazy.
It's not gay if it's the TSA. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The conversations I have with them, and I'm just like, what are you doing, man? What are you doing with your life? I kind of have a new goal to talk to people in those kind of positions where
dude, they have a
despair.
Government job they can't be fired from that comes with a retirement package. What do you mean? Yeah. What are they doing with their life? They're actually smarter than the two of us.
Maybe. Except we have ethics that keep us from being a part of this.
Well, see, I would just not enforce any of the stupid laws. I'd be like,
that's a good idea.
Whatever.
You know what? This is maybe we could just have a ministry, Keith, or Keith is a friend of mine that I'm thinking of on this. I'm sorry, Pete. I just called you Keith. I wonder if we could have this thing where we talk to, ATF agents, people who are in the TSA, and just say like, hey, man, here's what the Constitution says. You're swearing an oath to defend it. So here's all the laws that violate that. You just need to make sure you don't enforce them.
Well, have you seen that meme where people are like, okay, don't tell me you're a gun-abiding citizen, and then if the law changes and says you have to turn in your guns, you're not going to turn it in. You're no longer a law-abiding citizen. And someone responds to that and goes, don't tell me you're going to protect and defend the Constitution when you've been saying from day one that you're planning on violating the Constitution.
Yep.
And then you pass a law that violates the Constitution. And it was like, exactly how are you going to argue? You're breaking the law. You're breaking the Constitution. You're breaking your oath.
Yeah. This is the bigger issue that I don't even know if it's worth discussing, but that any of these laws are a violation of the Constitution in the first place. So we're in this place of like a legal cognitive dissonance where there's no way to fully obey all the laws because they're contradictory. Yeah. And we're just in a bad spot with that. So, anyway, bump stocks. We'll see what happens now that the ATF has admitted they're wrong. We'll see what's...
I read one article, and the guy was like, I've been telling you guys from the beginning this was part of Trump's plan. He gets to look good to the liberals. He tried to ban it, but he had no intention because he knew he had no authority to do so. And so now he's probably given the order, hey, stop defending what we already know isn't legal. And I look at that and I'm like, yeah, but I'm not convinced that that's really what Trump's plan was. I think maybe the ATF is just sitting there going, you know what? This is unconstitutional. We can't actually do this. Congress has to pass a law. We get to enforce their laws.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I remember. I remember watching a video of the guy who was in charge of something from ATF years ago related to kind of rulings on these things. And he was like, yep, I understand. And this was way before this bump stock ruling. He was like, I understand why everybody thinks this would be a bad thing. But he's like, here's what the law says. They're going to have to change the law if we're going to have any different ruling on this because you're not actually holding the trigger down. You're pulling the trigger multiple times. So when this, switcheroo happened, it's like, man, this is against what, like, they've already thought through this and said, no, we can't do that. Well, then all of a sudden executive orders come along and they go the other way. Now they're admitting they were wrong.
Yeah. And see, that's the whole thing. We don't live under a king. He doesn't get to create law. That's not what his role is. Yeah. So I personally, you and I have our own opinions on Trump, which we've shared. I don't know if we've shared it on this podcast or not, but it's not like either one of us are like, all hail Trump. But I look at that and I'm like, he did something that he didn't have the right to do.
Yeah, absolutely right.
I don't care if this was part of his, 4D chess BS that everyone's always out there saying. Yeah. It was wrong to begin with.
Yep. I agree fully. Yeah. So do you want to switch it up and talk about something that's a little bit funny as we finish this out?
Go for it.
So so this doesn't bum us out too hard. Have you looked into the yeet cannons?
Yes.
Pete?
Yes.
I think I want a yeet cannon.
Do you? I can't get it here in California. I guarantee you no one's buying that off roster and then turning around and selling it. But I wouldn't mind it.
Because this is what's crazy to me, and I want to talk about this as with a fellow marketer here. The whole method, the whole thing they went about. Now, that like most people make fun of High Point. Like they joke about them. They talk,
You never let a friend go full High Point.
Right, yeah. Those kind of things, right? And I would actually, I'm one of those that I'm like, hey, I think we've probably been a little bit harder on them than we need to be. It's fun to joke on, but they've been making a couple of their 9mm carbine is not a bad gun at all. And I think they've been stepping up their game a little bit. And I've watched a couple of reviews where people are trying to make fun of it. And they're like, well, it kept shooting. We ran over it with a truck and it still worked
saw that
after
one
that.
too.
And they're like, yeah. And then so they're still not going to give an endorsement, but they'll say, as a truck gun or just your extra, yeah, we got nothing bad to say about it. So I think you've got all that going on. And so there's been a little bit of people are not as negative about High Point as they used to be. Well, then, this whole marketing campaign to name this gun coming out, and then Yeet Cannon wins. They were going to try not to do it. And I think H&K harassed them and said, you guys better name it. You told your fans that this is what you were going to do. So now the whole gimmick and buzz over this thing, the joke about it, has caused people to want to get their hands on it. And so gun reviewers are reviewing this gun, and they're like, this is a halfway decent gun for as cheap it is. And so I'm just loving it. I want to get my hands on one. I want to review one. So if any of our listeners out there have one, want to let us borrow it for a weekend, do some shooting. Obviously, Pete will have to travel to Ohio to shoot it. And I'm not sure, honest truth, if Pete would be willing to fly across the country
just for a Yeet cannon.
Just for a Yeet cannon. We'd have to plan some other things in this. But I want to get my hands on a Yeet cannon. I'm just loving watching these reviews where guys are joking and laughing, and then they're like, and then it shot really well. They're like, it's certainly not the best gun in the world, but they're like, it worked. So anyway, I want to see this thing, and I think, can you imagine, Pete, if somebody broke into your house and you grabbed your Yeet cannon and you stopped a terrible thing from happening with a Yeet cannon.
With a Yeet cannon.
And then the news would have to be like, Yeet cannon this, Yeet cannon that. I think if I had a Yeet cannon, I would make it my everyday carry. Not because I think it's going to make me the safest, but because if I'm in a situation and I have to defend someone and we save the day with a Yeet cannon, it's going to be the best story. I'm going to be like, yeah, I'm rocking my Yeet cannon. And I will find every excuse when I'm talking to the news to be like, Yeet cannon, Yeet cannon, Yeet cannon.
Well, it's also really funny to anti-gunners, too. It would almost be making fun of them with the fact that, yes, my gun is really called a Yeet cannon.
Yeah. People are going to be Googling Yeet cannon because all the anti-gunners aren't going to know what that is. They're going to be picturing
it's probably
a
full automatic. It's basically a Glock 18. It's just called a Yeet cannon. That's what they're going to make it out to be.
Oh, if High Point could make something like that in a day when they re-legalize everything, and all of a sudden, can you imagine if High Point was making fully auto pistols? Actually, that would. Well,
you probably read about the there was that Chinese company that was making the sear so you could turn your Glock into an 18 and make it full automatic, and then they shipped 3,000 of them to the U.S. and so the ATF finally finds out about it, and now they're going after those 3,000 people because they're basically turning their Glocks into full autos with it.
Yeah, fun times.
I gotta tell you, I see here in California, we don't even mess with certain things. It's not worth it. And here's kind of the funny thing: when we had what we refer to as Freedom Week, that's when we had 1 week where we were allowed to buy any size magazine we wanted, and because a federal judge said it's unconstitutional to ban 30-round magazines, so you can buy whatever you want. We had 1 week that we could do that. And part of his ruling, I read the whole 80-some-odd page ruling, part of it was he was almost mocking the state, going, you literally wrote a provision that said Hollywood gets to have 30-round magazines. He goes, if ever there was someone who doesn't need a 30-round magazine, it's someone whose whole business is making fake stuff. Everything's fake in Hollywood. Why do you need to give them an allowance to have a 30-round magazine? So all of the good stuff in California, when we have someone who comes to the range and they're bringing a full auto, maybe they're bringing a saw or an M16 or something like that, it's because they're somehow involved with Hollywood. That's the only way to have it in California. So we have no NFA items. We have no hearing protection. We don't get suppressors. We get nothing fun here in California.
It's really sad, man.
It is.
Hopefully you guys get some freedom there soon. We'll see.
I think it's when the rest of the country just says, hey, California, I know you think you're all special and whatnot, but your debt is drowning us, so you're your own country. Go fend for yourself.
Yeah, man. That's a whole other conversation of what's going on with California debt, not to mention national debt.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Yeah. Oh, man. This is fun, dude. Get me excited about other guns.
Your yeet cannon. Well, why don't you go ahead and give Lake Erie their props, their proper due.
Yeah. So I got to tell everybody, we are huge fans, obviously, of Lake Erie Arms and all. We've talked about a lot of the events, things that they do. We're coming to the end of our event season. However, don't despair. We've got some cool stuff on the website that you can access from anywhere in the United States. So we have a few sets of free subscriptions where you can actually sign up for a basics of building an AR-15 or basics of handgun ownership if you're a first-time gun owner, basics of conceal carry. Now, none of this is, a class certification. It's just videos and training that you get through our free subscription that allows you to just learn a little bit more about all of this. I'm going to highly recommend the AR-15 ones because we walk through all of the different things you can do with triggers, all the different things you can do with barrels. It's completely free. Jump on and subscribe at learms.net. You will be glad you did. It'll be worth your time. And, of course, if you're in Northeast Ohio, drop in, talk to the guys. You will be glad you did.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us, everybody. We'll be back next week with another great episode. Take care.
Take care.
You've been listening to the From Concealment Podcast with Pete Mitchell and Dan Sams. Be sure to tune in next week for more gun talk. Also, check out the From Concealment website for more shooting-related goodness at FromConcealment.com.